So this talk today is for the Chief Information Security Officers, CFOs, and board members who may recently or certainly in the near future be making perhaps one of the most consequential decisions in your career. And that is not only about the question of the tools that you've deployed for your teams, but how they're using them. So while I'm currently CFO at IronNet and have the CFO's perspective and have a daily visibility into the kinds of threats that are affecting each of your organizations, I've also had the privilege of serving as the CFO of the U.S. national pensions insurer, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. And while that isn't quite as large with our $50 billion of assets under management as, say, the Bank of England, closed captioning shows recognition of Jamie of greatness, that we nevertheless took our responsibilities very seriously for stewardship and risk management. And lastly, I've had the privilege of serving for the last 5 years retired General Keith Alexander, founder of IronNet, who was the longest serving director of the National Security Agency, the first commander of U.S. Cyber Command, and importantly, the very first commander who was charged with not only defending the U.S. Department of Defense and its various assets, but also of the entire nation. So think about that challenge and that charge. I'd like to bring those three perspectives together for you today. So if I could have next slide, please. Great. So if I accomplish nothing else today, what I want you to do is think differently about how you're approaching this most important concept in cyber defense. The first point I'd like you to consider is why haven't we applied some well-established wisdom of the ages in cyberspace? We do need technology, that's for sure, but is it the right technology to do the job? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We also need formations, not just good skills in our teams, good position players, yes, we do need those, but it's really about how we meld them together in teams to form a greater whole. Consider in particular that our current model, which is built on for a range of understandable reasons, on a defend in isolation strategy. We talked about this in a panel earlier today. And think about the way your organizations address this question of how are you asked to defend. You are asked to defend yourselves first, and maybe you have a few friends. That is a model that needs to change. It also only works if you're large enough to field and pay for an entire team all by yourselves. So perhaps I can look for a show of hands around the room in terms of the number of organizations that feel that you have enough resources today to field an entire team all by yourself. All right, well, no hands please, because I think we all know the answer to that question. Well, consider as well our national cyber defenders. Remember Keith Alexander's perspective and how well you are equipping them to help you. They are the offense for all of us, and we need to consider all the ways that we can help them to operate better. To put this in perspective, let's use an air traffic control analogy to compare how we work together in cyberspace today and how actionable, keep that thought in mind, our exchanges most often comparatively are. So air traffic control, British Airways 529 Heavy, pilot of a de Havilland has radioed takeoff from within 20 miles of your position 90 minutes ago. Be advised to look out for that possible traffic. Compare that with how the interaction actually occurs today. Air traffic control, British Airways 529 Heavy, please be advised of de Havilland traffic at 2 o'clock, 5 miles your position, descending westbound through 12,000 feet. Now the first provides notice to others only if the pilot decides to let others know. Helpful, but not very timely, and not really specific enough to be usefully actionable. The latter is built on a regular, automated radar set of updates of air movements, regardless of whether any of those movements are of immediate interest to others or not. But they do become immediately actionable and immediately relevant when you happen to be in the proximity. So you can't be waiting to inform others until you've decided it's worth them hearing about it. In fact, this in air traffic control is available to even the very smallest planes that have a Mode C transponder on them, and that information is delivered directly into the cockpit. So, why is it that that air traffic control works this way, but we don't defend in cyberspace this way? Let me also let you consider another analogy, and this one perhaps a little closer to home. Let's take a typical mid-sized bank with an information systems and cyber team of, say, 10 people. Data is getting more dispersed and is growing exponentially each year across more and more applications. Digitally based services are increasing your attack surfaces, and they continue to proliferate even as your CFO, resemble that remark, says no more headcount. More importantly, the sophistication of the attack tools and teams coming against you and the ways that they can disrupt or compromise your banks and their operations get more devious and dangerous by the year. Your team is working as hard as they can to keep up using current defend in isolation approaches and just simply are not keeping up. And then there's the 10-person team at the bank just down the road. Same situation, same overwhelmed group, same suboptimal outcomes. And so on for the rest of the 90 like-sized banks across the country. Now, consider if all of those teams had the technology to enable them to work together, benefiting from the awareness of when they're working on events in common, automatically maintaining that picture, and as each works through problems, immediately enabling the others to quickly action like events. That is 900 people working together, bringing their specialties to bear, while at the same time working in a data-protected way to better enable the national cyber defenders to do their jobs. Does that sound like team play? A better way? Well, yes. Cyber defense is a team sport, and companies need to think and act that way, and most importantly, to equip their teams to play it that way. Cross-index hunt, detection and response, these are all things that are important in real time. Next slide, please. All right, so so the first thing to be doing after applying a little bit of ancient wisdom is to listen to the experts. So the insurers are out there. I've cited Marsh as one of their examples, their Cyber Catalyst program, but there are many others in the insurance industry that are out there setting up standards of ways to go about solving this problem differently. Likewise, take a look at executive orders. I shared a panel this morning with one of the leaders here in the UK in setting up some frameworks that are going to make a difference in how companies and agencies go about their cyber defense. So take a look at some of these themes here. Continuous verification of the operational picture, multi-source information, comprehensive security monitoring, coordinated system security automation, ability to engage across cross-index cyber hunt detection and response. These are all things that I think are important elements to a cybersecurity stack and a set of methodologies that meld them all together for an advanced cyber defense of today. Next slide, please. All right, so you as a Chief Information Security Officer get it, but does your CFO get it? Well, first of all, you need to know that we are on the same side, equally charged in our duties with assessing and investing our company's resources, not only in properly countering and mitigating risks to our success, but also to maximizing our investment in achieving our company or agency's mission. We are on the same side. Let me also introduce you to how we're thinking about the investment requests as you come to us. We'll often think about them in three buckets. This is built around maximizing a key differentiating factor essential to advancing our mission. On the left side, that would be a differentiating cost. And for most of you, depending on your company or agency's mission, even your most strategic cyber investments and realignments will not fall in this category. On the other extreme, over on the right-hand side, we're assessing whether the request is necessary, but is essentially a commoditized spend. Antivirus, firewall, endpoint, and even, I will argue, Suricata-based systems focused on known behavioral indicators fall into this category, which is to say, most of your cyber spend today. It's in the middle category that really gets my interest as a CFO. Use it judiciously, but where applicable, you must be bold in articulating it and indeed using it. For spending in this category, I suggest that the types of strategic and realigned spending that we're talking about today should fall here. This requires consideration of two important elements to determine what the right amount of spend should be. Does that amount directly support an essential operating outcome, an enabling, though not differentiating business objective? And more importantly, for the proposed amount of spend, does it meet the thresholds of performance? Now, this is the one where the rub really occurs and where your expertise is most essential in making sure to connect those dots for you with your ask and you with your CFO. It is in this latter area, indeed, where the breakdowns occur the most, where a threshold of performance is being articulated, but is not sufficient to be up for the job. So that's a hard question that you need to make sure that as a requester you've asked, because I, as the CFO, am going to be asking that question. I'll explore the elements of what would constitute sufficiency for this strategic set of cyber investments in just a moment. So let me make sure to focus on this being an importantly different category and that you think about using it at the right times. Expect to be challenged on both of these points. And when it is you, the Chief Information Security Officer, talking to your CFO, expect to challenge us. You are the experts, and we really want to hear from you, especially when you are well informed and come to us with conviction. Next slide, please. Okay, so what you need to tell me about the problem you're solving and how well you're proposing to address it. The left side is a fairly decent description of the problems that have directly led to the serious compromise of tens of thousands of companies and agencies in the United States alone in the last 12 months. I'm sure that is the case in the UK as well. Global tensions combined with ready availability of some of the best attack tools, the presence of well-organized teams, and regular success are the norm today. So really, without taking a different view on how you're setting up your teams to defend your companies, too many of us will remain in the there but for the grace of God go I kind of posture. I know that neither you nor your CFOs like to be telling your boards that, and you know those are the questions they're asking you. How well positioned are we against these kinds of attacks? How well do we understand them, and what have we done about it? The questions to ask your technology and your teams are listed out on the right side, and they are equally hard. Are they strengthening one of your point solutions or strengthening your stack as a whole? Are they able to detect beyond just the known hashes and known behavioral indicators that you'll find in your Suricata rule set? Even if enhanced by artificial intelligence and machine learning, if you're starting with only the known bads, even behavioral ones from Suricata, you'll miss the camouflaged ones. Remember, that's a left side topic. Anyone here have SolarWinds in their operational stacks? Who found that in May of last year and protected your companies accordingly? When, and even if you interact with others, is that information specific and timely enough with what you're working on right now to be of use? Remember the air traffic control analogy and think about the application of that within your cyber defensive environment. And go beyond how you defend your defend in isolation perspective. This is how you're defending and working with others and helping your national defenders to do their job better is going to make a difference. Is your stack and your investment accomplishing that end? Next slide, please. All right, so let me suggest one such set of new perspectives that you can access today. Consider the cyber radar picture on the right. In the lower left, each dot represents all of the higher priority events going on in your enterprise, with the blue ones not fully evaluated. Interesting, company-centric, but a fairly classical picture. Consider, though, those of your events which are richly enough and anonymously correlated with the relevant events that are going on in other companies, other banks down the street, as it were, in your and possibly a related industry sector. Consider the ones already triaged by someone else, Tier 3 analysts who have taken a look at an event just like one that you're working on and have provided the information of what they had concluded. Those are events on which you can act right away, effectively done, effectively sorted. Consider as well the blue events that you have in common with someone else in your industry, or even in yours or a related one. They are already interesting to you because of their commonality. But also, the time that your team puts into these means that someone else does not need to spend the time resolving the same problem. This is how SOC teams can really change the way they operate in terms of efficiency and just not resolving the problem that someone else down the road has already addressed. Is this sounding more like the essential elements of playing cyber defense as a team sport? I hope you see it that way. Next slide, please. So let me conclude with a recap. I started by challenging each of you to consider two questions. Are you still largely defending your company in isolation, or have you realigned both your technologies and your teams to play cyber defense as a team sport? Whether you're the CFO considering, and so those are really the questions that need to be addressed. Are you investing in detection capabilities that are able to see and detect what's going on in your physical and cloud-based systems beyond those threats that have been known and are already characterized? Are your automation approaches bringing the process and cross-correlation smarts of others across your systems, in addition to just applying automation to established processes and the smarts within the point solution parts of your data? Is the way in your industry, you and your industry, going about working together fast and precise enough to work in real time as an effective whole? Or are you mostly just providing basic situational awareness and still, for the most part, defending in isolation? Ask the hard questions. Play cyber defense as a team sport and equip your teams accordingly. So I think I've got a quick moment, if you'll go to the last slide, and we'll take a few questions, if anybody has them, from the floor or from cyberspace. Okay, from the virtual systems, questions: are firms more likely to spend less on cybersecurity until they're the victim of a significant attack? Well, unfortunately, this is the model, indeed, of how many companies have had to deal with their cyber events. They will have lived in that right-hand side set of investments, bringing only to their CFOs what they think the CFOs will be willing to invest in, and not investing in sufficient technology and sufficient methodologies to actually counter those left-hand side threats that I listed out on that one slide. So unfortunately, what that does mean is that a cyber compromise is, in fact, inevitable. It is only going to be in really reaching out and confronting those very difficult attack vectors that are out there right now that is going to prevent people from being in the headlines. And with that, I think I am out of time, but thank you very much for your time today.